My wife secretly transferred $200, $0 from our joint account to her lover's offshore account right before filing for divorce, and now he's claiming ownership of our house and a 401k worth over $500, $0. Can I still fight back? I never thought I'd be the guy sitting here, typing out my story, but here I am. Honestly, if you told me a year ago that my wife would cheat on me, steal $250,000 from our joint account, and try to screw me over in a divorce, I'd have called you crazy. But life has a way of throwing you into the deep end with no warning. It all started about 6 months ago. Things between me and Lisa, my wife, had been feeling a little off. She was always busy with work, but I chalked it up to her being ambitious. She's the kind of woman who's always chasing something bigger, more money, more success, more status. She's gorgeous, confident, and yes, a bit bitchy when she doesn't get her way. But I loved her, or at least I thought I did. I started noticing little things. She was secretive about her phone, always with a lock on it. She'd take calls in the bathroom or step outside to talk. I never really pressed her on it. I figured she was just being private, maybe a bit stressed. Then I noticed she was spending a lot of time on her laptop late at night, typing away. She'd sometimes get defensive when I asked what she was doing, brushing me off with a quick, just work stuff. But what really made me suspicious was the sudden, strange behavior around our money. Lisa had always been pretty good with the finances, but lately she was evasive. She'd hide her phone when I entered the room, and once I caught her deleting some text messages. I didn't think much at first, just a woman being shady. But then I found out she'd been secretly transferring money from our joint account. It started with small amounts, $10, zero here, $20, $0 there. I thought maybe she was investing or paying off some bills I didn't know about. But then I noticed a pattern. She was moving money to an offshore account. I didn't even know she had an offshore account. I looked into it, and that's when I saw the transfer of $200, $0 just days before she filed for divorce. That's when everything changed. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. How could she do this? How could she betray me like that? I confronted her about it, but she spun some ridiculous story about how she was just trying to secure our future, that she'd been planning to tell me but got cold feet. She said she was tired of living in a boring, dead-end marriage and wanted her own life. But I knew better. I knew she had been cheating on me long before she started siphoning money, and then I found out about the affair. I didn't see it coming, not at all. I'd been noticing her sneaking around, her phone always glued to her hand, her getting defensive whenever I asked about her whereabouts. One night I decided to follow her. I wasn't proud of it, but I had to know. I parked my car near her office, and what I saw made my stomach turn. She was in a hotel with some guy, probably her lover, going into the room with him. They were kissing, touching. I saw enough to know this wasn't just some business dinner or a friend helping her with work. It was something more. That moment hit me like a freight train. My wife, the woman I married, was cheating on me with some guy she met online or through her work contacts I don't even know. She was lying to my face, sneaking around behind my back. And she was stealing from us at the same time. I felt a mix of rage, heartbreak, and utter betrayal. I couldn't believe I'd been so blind. All those signs, all those little lies, I should have seen it coming. But I wasn't going to let her get away with it, not without a fight. That's when I started planning my next move. I needed to know everything to get proof, to understand exactly how deep her betrayal went. Because I was done being the fool in this story. I needed to take control, to fight back. And that's where I am now, trying to figure out how to stop her from walking away with everything, especially after she took so much already. After seeing her with that guy, everything changed inside me. I couldn't just sit around and pretend I didn't know. I had to act, had to get some proof, some leverage. I started digging into her financials, her online activity, anything that could give me a clearer picture of her plans. I wasn't naive. I knew she was clever, manipulative even, but I also knew she was reckless in her lies. First thing I did was hire a private investigator. I didn't want to do it myself. I didn't want to tip her off. I figured if I could catch her in the act or uncover her communication with her lover, I'd have the evidence I needed. Within days, the pie came back with some shocking intel. She'd been meeting this guy Daniel at least twice a week. They had secret codes, hidden messages, texts that she tried to delete but never quite managed. Meanwhile, I kept a close eye on the bank accounts. The offshore transfer was just the tip of the iceberg. I discovered she'd been funneling money into accounts all over the world, some in the Caribbean, others in Europe. I couldn't believe how much planning she'd done to hide her tracks. But what really made my blood boil was the fact that she had transferred $200, $0 from our joint account, just days before she filed for divorce. That was a clear sign she was trying to protect her new life at my expense. I confronted her myself one night. I waited until she came home late after I'd gathered enough evidence. When she saw me waiting in the living room, her face twisted into that bitchy smile she always wore when she thought she was winning. I told her I knew everything about her affair, the money, the lies. Her reaction was classic: denial, then anger, then more lies. She told me I was paranoid, that I was inventing things, that she loved me and this was just a phase. She even had the nerve to say she was doing all of this for us, that she wanted a better future, that she was tired of pretending everything was perfect. I couldn't believe how she lied so easily, so effortlessly. It was like talking to a wall of bullshit. I told her I had the proof, that I knew about her offshore accounts, about her affair with Daniel. Her face went pale for a second, probably realizing I was onto her. But then she snapped back, throwing her head in, saying I was crazy, that she'd never do such a thing, that I was just jealous, insecure, and paranoid. She accused me of spying on her, of making everything up. She called me controlling and possessive, and then she stormed out of the room, leaving me standing there with my fists clenched and my mind racing. That night, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. I was angry, devastated, and honestly, feeling pretty stupid for not seeing it sooner. I'd poured so much into this marriage, years of good times, some bad, but I always thought we were solid. Turns out she'd been planning her escape, her new life, for months, and I was just some fool who thought I knew her. But I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything, not without a fight. I decided I'd get a lawyer, figure out the legal side of things. I wanted to know if I could fight for the house, the 401k, the money she stole. I'd read enough to know that she might be trying to hide assets, move money around to screw me over in the divorce. I also started looking into what I could do about her offshore accounts, how to freeze them, how to claim my share if I had to go to court. Every moment felt like a roller coaster. One minute I was furious, then I was sad, then I was planning my next move. I realized that the woman I thought I knew was just a stranger hiding behind a pretty face and a manipulative smile. I kept replaying everything she said, all her lies about how much she loved me, how she was just tired, how she wanted a fresh start. It all sounded so fake now, but I also knew I had to stay calm. I couldn't let her see how much she'd broken me. I started gathering more evidence, screenshots, bank statements, messages, and I made a plan. I wasn't just going to let her take everything and walk away. If she thought she could cheat, steal, and lie her way out of this, she'd be in for a rude awakening. The hardest part was the emotional toll. I felt betrayed, crushed, and angry all at once. Every time I thought about the money she stole, the affair she was hiding, I wanted to scream. But I also knew I had to keep my composure. I had to be smart about this. Because now it wasn't just about love or trust. It was about money, power, and who had the right to what was ours. I was determined to fight for what was mine, no matter what it took. By the time I had all the evidence laid out, screenshots of her texts with Daniel, bank statements showing the offshore transfers, the private investigators' reports, I felt a strange mixture of relief and rage. Relief because I finally knew the truth, and rage because that truth was so bitter. She'd been planning this whole time, lying through her teeth, pretending everything was fine while she was building her escape route. I went straight to a lawyer the next morning. I needed someone who knew the ins and outs of divorce law, especially with assets and hidden money involved. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Corinne, listened carefully as I laid out everything. She told me I had a strong case, especially with the evidence of the offshore accounts and the transfer of $200, $0 right before she filed. She said I could potentially contest the divorce, fight for a larger share of the assets, and even seek to recover some of the stolen money. The plan was to freeze all her accounts, including the offshore ones, before she could move anything further. Then I'd file for a court hearing to contest the division of assets, particularly the house and the 401k worth over $500,000. I knew she'd try to spin her story, say she was just acting in her own best interest or some bullshit like that. But I had the proof and I was ready. In the meantime, I had to confront her again. I couldn't let her think she could get away with everything. When she came home that afternoon, I was waiting in the living room, calm but firm. I told her I knew about her affair, her secret accounts, and her plans to leave me with nothing. Her face twisted into that same bitchy smirk, but I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. She started lying again, saying I was paranoid, that I was just jealous and insecure. She said she was doing this for herself, that she deserved to be happy, even if it meant breaking my heart. I didn't buy it. I told her I had all the proof, that I was going to fight for what's ours. I warned her that if she tried to hide or transfer any more assets, I'd go after her in court. She snapped back, calling me a controlling jerk, accusing me of spying on her, and then she started crying, big fake tears, I could tell. She said she never meant to hurt me, that she loved me but was just stressed and desperate for a change. That's when I realized how good she was at lying. Even in tears, she was still trying to manipulate me. I felt like I was losing my grip on reality. How could she sit there and lie so convincingly, knowing what I knew? I wanted to shake her, scream at her, tell her she was a manipulative bitch. But I kept my composure. I told her she had two choices: come clean, or I'd take her to court and fight for everything she was trying to steal from me. I also told her I was going to call the bank, the offshore firms, and the divorce lawyer first thing in the morning. I was done playing nice. I knew she'd try to spin her story in court, but I had the proof, and I was prepared to fight dirty if I had to. I was sick of her lies, her betrayal, and her sneaking around behind my back. I wanted her out of my life, but I also wanted justice. Over the next few days, the tension in the house was unbearable. She kept insisting she was innocent, that I was blowing everything out of proportion, that I was just insecure. But I saw through her. She was panicked, trying to cover her tracks. She'd pack a bag, then unpack it, constantly checking her phone and emails. I could tell she was trying to transfer more money, hide assets, or even run away. Meanwhile, I kept gathering my evidence, preparing for the inevitable legal battle. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. She was a manipulative, bitchy woman who'd do anything to save herself. But I was determined. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything she'd stolen. Not without a fight. I kept thinking about how much I'd loved her, how I'd believed in our marriage. And now, all that trust was gone. She'd lied, cheated, stole from us, and tried to leave me with nothing. I kept asking myself, how did it come to this? How did I end up in this nightmare? But I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't giving up. I'd fight tooth and nail to get what's mine, and I'd make sure she paid for what she did, one way or another. The day I finally filed the paperwork was one of the hardest days I've ever faced. Sitting in that lawyer's office, signing documents that declared her attempts to hide money, her offshore accounts, and her plans to leave me with nothing. It all felt surreal. I kept thinking about how I was supposed to be building a life with her, how I trusted her, and now I was fighting to keep what was rightfully ours. Karen, my lawyer, was aggressive but strategic. She knew exactly how to handle these kinds of cases. She told me that with the evidence I had, I stood a good chance of contesting the divorce, especially the part about the offshore accounts and the money she transferred just before filing. She also explained that I could challenge her claim to the house and the 401k because she was trying to hide assets and manipulate the court. That gave me a small spark of hope. Maybe I wouldn't lose everything after all. The first real move was to freeze her accounts. I had her bank accounts, the offshore accounts, everything. I made sure the bank blocked any further transfers. That was a relief, but I knew she'd be furious. I could picture her scrambling, trying to figure out her next move. I also instructed my lawyer to subpoena her phone and email records. I needed to see her communications with Daniel, her lover, and any other accomplices she might have. That night, I sat alone in the house, feeling a strange mix of exhaustion and adrenaline. I kept replaying everything, her lies, her sneaking around, her trying to manipulate everyone. I felt a deep sense of betrayal, but also a resolve to see this through. I knew she'd do everything to spin her story in court to make me look like the bad guy, but I had the evidence, and I was determined to fight for my rights. The next day, I got a call from my lawyer. She told me that her office had obtained new evidence, more messages between Lisa and Daniel, discussing their plans to escape and start fresh with the money. It was clear they'd been working together to hide assets and scheme their way out of the marriage. Corinne also said she'd found some suspicious transfers to other offshore accounts, which could be seized or frozen. That's when I realized just how far she was willing to go. She was trying to run, trying to hide, and trying to cheat me out of what was ours. I felt a mixture of anger and disgust. How could she be so selfish, so dishonest? But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I knew what I had to do now, keep fighting no matter how dirty she played. I was going to make sure she paid for every lie, every dollar she stole, and every betrayal she committed. I started preparing my case for court. I gathered all the evidence, organized the financial documents, and made a timeline of her actions. I wanted the judge to see how calculated her moves had been, how she'd planned this entire scam from the beginning. I also started thinking about how to prove that. She was trying to cheat me out of the house and the retirement account. It wasn't just about money anymore, it was about justice. In the meantime, Lisa was losing it. She started making frantic calls, trying to spin stories to friends and family about how cruel I was being, how I was trying to control her, and how she was just doing what she needed to do for herself. She was lying, of course. I could see right through it. She was panicked, desperate, and furious that I was fighting back. I could tell she thought she could manipulate her way out of this mess, but I wasn't going to let her. That night, I sat alone in my room, staring at the documents I'd printed out. I felt a strange mix of anger, sorrow, and determination. I had loved her once, believed in us, but she had destroyed that with her lies and greed. I knew that the road ahead would be tough, court battles, more lies, more manipulation. But I also knew I wouldn't stop fighting. I wasn't just fighting for the money or the house. I was fighting to reclaim my dignity, my future, and whatever shred of self-respect I had left. I looked at the photos of happier days, of us smiling, and I wondered how it all fell apart so fast. But I also knew that I had to stay strong. This wasn't just about losing a wife. It was about standing up for myself and making sure she didn't walk away with everything she'd tried to steal. I was done being a victim. Now I was the one fighting back. The court date was set for 2 weeks later. Those 14 days felt like a lifetime. Every morning I woke up with a knot in my stomach, knowing that Lisa was probably panicked, trying to hide more assets or spin some new lie. I kept my head down, focused on preparing my case, double-checking every document, every transfer, every message I had. My lawyer kept telling me I had a strong case, but I knew Lisa's type. She was cunning, manipulative, and would do everything to evade justice. During those days, she tried to act like everything was normal. She'd cook dinner, pretend everything was fine, but I could see the cracks in her facade. She was constantly on her phone, probably trying to find a way out of this mess. I knew she'd be scheming, trying to transfer more money or even hide her lover's tail behind some new fake account. I couldn't let that happen. I had already frozen her main accounts, but I knew her desperation would push her to do more. One night, she snapped at me during an argument. She called me paranoid, accused me of spying on her, and said I was just insecure because I couldn't handle the fact that she wanted a better life. She said she deserved happiness, even if it meant lying, cheating, or stealing. That was her way of justifying everything she'd done. I looked at her and felt a mixture of disgust and pity. She was so blind to her own greed that she couldn't see how far she'd fallen. The day before the hearing, I had everything ready. My lawyer told me to stay calm, that the evidence I had was solid. She said we'd argue that Lisa had been trying to hide assets, that the transfer of $200, $0 just before filing, was a clear attempt to shield money from division. She also mentioned that we challenge her claim to the house and the 401k, especially since I could prove she was trying to manipulate the court with false statements. When I arrived at the courthouse, I felt like I was walking into a battlefield. Lisa was there, looking tense, her face pale but still trying to put on that bitchy smirk. I saw her glance at me and I knew she was nervous. That's when I realized that her bravado was just a mask. She knew she was cornered. The hearing was intense. My lawyer presented all the evidence, screenshots, bank statements, the private investigator's report. I testified about how I discovered her affair, how she transferred the money, and how she'd been lying to everyone. Lisa spun her story, claiming she'd been just trying to protect her future, that she loved me but was stressed out, and that her actions were justified. But the judge wasn't buying her bullshit. The judge asked pointed questions about the offshore accounts, the timing of the money transfer, and her claims about the house and the 401k. I saw her squirm under the pressure, trying to come up with excuses. I also brought in some expert witnesses, financial analysts who confirmed that the transfers were suspicious and that Lisa had potentially committed fraud. In the end, the judge ruled in my favor on several key points. She ordered the freeze of her offshore accounts, declared that the transfer of $200 was suspicious, and questioned her claim to the house and retirement funds. The judge also scheduled a follow-up hearing to determine the final division of assets, but it was clear I had made a significant impact. I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe easier. I knew Lisa was furious, probably plotting her next move, but I also knew I had done everything I could to protect myself. I looked over at her as she sat there, her face a mixture of anger and defeat. She had underestimated me, thought she could lie her way out of everything. But I had the proof, and now the court was on my side. That night, I went home exhausted but relieved. I knew this wasn't over yet. She'd fight back, try to manipulate the system further. But I also knew I had taken the first real step toward reclaiming what she tried to steal from me. I looked at my phone and saw the messages from her lover, Daniel, asking if she'd won yet. I knew she was probably still scheming, but I also knew that I had the upper hand now. I had fought for my rights and I had won some battles. The war wasn't over, but I was ready for whatever came next. The weeks following the court victory were a whirlwind. Lisa's reaction was everything I expected. She doubled down on her lies, trying to spin her version of events to friends and family, claiming I was trying to ruin her, that she was the real victim. But I didn't care anymore. The court had spoken, and the evidence was clear. Her attempts to manipulate the situation only confirmed how much she'd been willing to do to get away with her betrayal. I moved forward with the legal process to finalize the division of assets. The house was awarded to me after some fierce negotiations, especially since I could prove she'd been hiding money and trying to manipulate the system. The 401k was split fairly, with the court recognizing her attempts to siphon off funds just before the divorce. I also managed to recover some of the stolen money. Those offshore accounts were frozen, and some of the transfers were reversed. Throughout it all, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. Losing Lisa hurt more than I thought it would. I kept replaying the memories of happier times, questioning how I'd missed so many signs. But I also knew that I had done everything I could to fight for my rights. It wasn't just about the money or the house anymore. It was about reclaiming my dignity and moving on from a woman who had betrayed me in the worst way. In the end, I learned some hard lessons. Trust is everything in a relationship, and once that's broken, it's nearly impossible to fix. I also learned that greed and lies can destroy what you've built if you're not careful, but I also learned that you can fight back. No matter how clever or manipulative someone is, the truth has a way of coming out, especially when you have the evidence. Now I'm rebuilding my life. It's not easy and I still feel the sting of betrayal every day, but I'm taking it one step at a time. I've started focusing on myself, on my future. I've cut out toxic people, including Lisa, and I'm trying to learn to trust again, carefully, slowly. I know I'll never forget what happened, but I also know that I can move past it. If there's one thing I want anyone in a similar situation to understand, it's this. Don't be afraid to fight for what's yours. Don't let someone steal your happiness, your money, or your peace of mind. Be smart, gather your evidence, and stand your ground. Because in the end, justice isn't just about winning in court. It's about reclaiming your life and dignity after betrayal. And I can tell you from experience, the fight is worth it.